healthcare is a major pain point today. We have amazing personalized care within oncology. Of course, a lot more can be done, but they are limited personalized care outside of oncology, especially if you look into the area of CNS, including both on the neuropsychology as well as the neurodegenerative diseases space, as well as areas such as mental health. We're also still lacking the best treatments today for cardiometabolic diseases, respiratory diseases. So that's one of the pain points. And I would say the second is certainly the cost of healthcare. Yeah, so it's interesting. We have seen post-COVID quite an uptick in, for example, telemedicine, and some changes. However, it doesn't yet still address many of the issues I had just mentioned that persisted before COVID. A lot more people are interested in healthcare, which is wonderful. A lot more young people are actually going into healthcare in response to COVID, but there's still a lot to do. So many are going into the access to care point, right? How do you provide care in a better way? How do you help patients also manage their disease in a more effective way? So, for example, in areas such as aging at home, we see a number of startups going into that space. In digital health generally, right, in areas where you could, for example, expedite clinical trials. That's another area where many of the startups are going into, and just general better delivery of care. So tools for providers so that they can personalize care to each individual patient. So one is care models, right? So this is an area for patients, for payers, when you're making tools also for providers, they're the clients of your tools that you're developing. And then the second bucket would be computational life sciences. So this is where pharma, biotech, diagnostic companies are your clients. So if we start with computational life sciences, for example, and this is where we see amazing startups, especially coming out here where I am in the Boston, Cambridge area. This is where we're talking about AI-enabled, for example, drug discovery platforms that are helping you find new targets, that are helping you find new candidates, identify, prioritize candidates, the virtual clinical trial platforms, right, where you can completely redo the way that you do clinical trials today, and ways, for example, new ways of optimizing and capturing data from patients, looking and capturing that real world evidence data that many of the pharma biotech companies really need in order to make sure that we truly personalize our therapies to patients, helping tools that help with enrollment of patients, enrollment of people into clinical trials, and also matching the right people to the right trials, right? Right now, many of the trials we're matching patients blindly, and there are some amazing digital health tools today to help do the proper matching. And then also things such as patient adherence tools, right? So that, again, enable and help that the clinical trials to run more smoothly. And also ways to really draw insights from data and predict pretty early in silico, before you put a drug into human trials, to predict whether or not the drug is going to be either there's toxicity or efficacy. So amazing tools that we see right now, lots of companies in that space across the entire continuum. Second area, which I mentioned, is the care models. This is where we have many chronic disease management tools. This is where we also see a lot of startups coming in, helping patients manage their disease, especially in the area of cardiometabolic health, in the area of respiratory, as well as in oncology as well. There are amazing patient delivery applications that we see today as well. Patient navigation tools, patient education tools that help patients, empower patients to really go through their healthcare journey. There are prior pre-authorization tools, again, things to make healthcare more efficient, right? So we talked about high costs. So these are the tools that lower that cost. And then clinical decision support tools. These are some of the tools that help the physician to guide them through proper treatment specific to that person to that individual patient that they're seeing. Other efficient tools we see are hospital triage, for example. This is what helps hospitals manage their patients, again, more effectively, more efficiently, in a more cost-effective way. And then we also see really super exciting novel devices and novel therapeutics and novel diagnostics. So anywhere where we see, for example, sensors that are put into devices that help us, for example, predict falls, right? So if you're getting a hip replacement, knee replacement, or predict rate of infection. There's some really exciting digital therapeutics that are finally getting noticed. Great companies such as Pear Therapeutics that are getting FDA approval for their digital therapeutics. And then we see AI-enabled diagnostics as well. So as an example, we can now detect diabetic retinopathy fairly simple without the use of an ophthalmologist or really any technician. It can just be done automatically and with a higher rate of accuracy than an ophthalmologist. So we're super excited about those digital health tools. The technologies that actually go into and address the cost of care. So as I mentioned, the cost of care is very high. And one of the reasons cost of care is high is because of the high cost of development. So AI is a great, one of the great tools that you can use there because it can help us really understand, for example, biology of diseases better. It can help, as an example, us understand how the brain works, right? It can help us understand what actually causes Alzheimer's. So AI is really a wonderful tool to look through the data and give us insights into that. Again, AI, there are many issues with AI, so it's not a magic, some magic thing, but it's very important if used properly. It also helps us, as I mentioned, in terms of finding the right candidates and new targets faster, meaning that we can actually do our R&D much faster than we ever previously have been able to do, and also much cheaper. And it also accelerates both development on the development side, but also discovery, and also matching, for example, patients to the right trials and enrolling patients faster. That's all use of AI, really, that helps you with that. As you mentioned, from the very beginning with this, right? So I come from a very traditional healthcare therapeutics background, right? So with pharma, with biotech, also investing in therapeutics. And then we've seen about, Roche was really one of the first major companies in the healthcare space to really embrace digital and, through acquisitions of Flatiron, MySugar, and others. And at the time, it was a bit of a shock, right? We thought as traditional players, well, what is happening? Is this going to, how is this going to be changing? But that, I think, some of those surprises and have really dissipated, right? We know that tech players, we understand what, and after that, especially going onto the Google side, it's very clear where tech players want to be playing and where traditional pharma and traditional biotech, med device, diagnostic players want to be playing. We also see that in some areas, so for example, as in sensors, I was just mentioning, that collaboration really is key. So whereas about 5 years ago, if you asked people, they would be threatened by each other and saying, well, people are going to be disrupted. We're recognizing that everybody is going to be disrupted by working together. There is no, and healthcare is so complicated because we haven't talked about reimbursement, regulatory, IP. We haven't talked about any of those things, right, that are so vital to the healthcare industry. That working together and having the tech players coming in and that convergence is really key. So it's not so much disruption of one industry of the other, it's more of the value is going to come from those new players coming in and converging with the traditional players and innovating together.